I have so much to say. I got to make sure that I remember everything. But I think that this is part two. I think that this is part two because the question, what was the process? How was the process? And what were the things that I feel have helped me in the steps of letting go of the resentment? Two things come to mind, especially, and kind of looking back the way things had played out. Because when I was so filled with resentment toward them, and that messed me up related to that evening, I just spent 15 minutes owning up to that. But there's a little bit more to the story here. There's a little bit more to the story because 2 years later, in 87, when I had dropped the resentment, I still hadn't totally forgiven them, but I had dropped the resentment and the rage the best way I knew how at that time in 87. There was more that I had to work on, but that's where it had started. That was my turning point. 87 was the year where things had happened and miracles had happened, which was incredible for that era. And also, but here's the irony. Here's the irony, and not just how it was ludicrous for me to be angry at them and then expecting to be blessed that night and to receive, okay, I already said that. But 2 years later, it didn't even matter, because 2 years later, when I had, in 87, now listen carefully, when I let go of the resentment, I had started, that was when it was the last meeting, the same one, I grew up on that meeting, the same one that you guys were the head of. Georgia Germont and family, they were the head of that meeting. I grew up on that meeting where I prayed the sinner's prayer as a 14-year-old. So it was the last meeting where they had attended in February of 87, and then when I had let things go and stuff, then a month later, in March 14th, 87, guess what? I started videotaping Disneyland. And I thought I had died and gone to heaven with that big heavy thing on my shoulder. And 87 was a turning point year for me. And now here's, if I can say this the way my mom had said it, here's the whole irony, was when I had let go of that anger and the resentment toward them, Mom took over. You know the old saying, when you turn things over to God, then God, two can't drive the steering wheel, then God takes over. God and Mommy Bear took over. Because then when I had let go of that and I had calculated it when that happened, that Mom took care of business. She handled the situation. And she had a meeting with this Georgia Germont. So when I had let it go of the resentment, Mom took over. I'm serious. And I got to go to Disney, and I started videotaping Disneyland, and my life at the age of 25 started all over again. But now here's the whole irony. Here's the whole irony, because 30 years later, when my mom had to move out of the house that I grew up in into the apartment, and then we were doing some family bonding and chatting and stuff, and various names had come up. And then Mom told me this is a true story. Mom told me all at once about a meeting she had with this Georgia Germont, and where she had, because he had verbally attacked me and slandered me that I didn't even know about. But Mom had words with him, and my mom took care of it. I thought she made it up. Because she waited 30 years to tell me. I'm serious. And I momentarily got mad at her. I says, Mom, after all of the anger and the resentment and bad feelings and grudges and so on, you're telling me now? I thought that she was just making it up. But then, and I says, but then when she described where she had met this Georgia Germont and family, when she had a penthouse at the Balboa Bay Club, from 86 to 93. And then she described, and she got into detail, and then both were there, and the businessmen and the meeting and the long tables and everything. And she told me, she jumped to my defense, even in certain things that I didn't deserve, certain things that I admit it, I confess it, certain things that I was guilty of also were bad choices that I had made at that time, stuff going back to my teenage years when it was the breakup. but still, she had defended me, and it was a challenge growing up in my relationship with my mom. But in the long run, she's the one which was my biggest protector and came to my rescue. And then I asked her, I says, Mom, why did you wait 30 years to tell me? I says, are you tripping? Is this for real? But then she described exactly the meeting and so on and what she had said and everything in vivid detail. And I says, Mom, why did you wait 30 years to tell me about this meeting after all I had gone through? And here's what she said to me. I'm serious. This is a true story. She said, to quote her, I didn't want to tell you because I protected you. He attacked you. He had no business slandering you and saying stuff about you. I protected you when he attacked you, but I didn't want to tell you because you would have gone to them and you would have said, my mom, kind of like with the kids, my mom says it's rain. You would have gone to them and my mom said so-and-so to you. They would have denied it. It would have gotten into a fight. And she says, but it sounds better in Serbian. I protected you. I shielded you. But I didn't want to tell you because I didn't want there to be, she said it in Serbian, so I'm thinking in Serbian now. I'll translate. Ja nisam htela da bude abrove, intrige I da budeš prsla vreća. Ja nisam htela da to ide dalje. Did you get all that? Nisam htela abrove. I didn't want there to be gossip and rumors, I intrige and intrigue, I da budeš prsla vreća, to be like a torn sack because you would have said everything to them. Ja sam tebe branila, ali nisam htela da to ide uopšte dalje. I protected you, but I didn't want it to go further. I'm serious. That's all of this insanity, and at the end, praise God, I'm laughing at this insanity looking back. But at the end, just like, and I did a whole video of Mickey with the Sorcerer's Apprentice. Now, to put a disclaimer, we're not going into the occult or witchcraft. All of that is of the devil. All of that is against God. So I want to put a little disclaimer here. But Mickey's okay. Mickey with the Sorcerer's Apprentice, it's just an example. It's just a parable. I'm not going into any theological debate here. But you can learn a lot from Mickey, more than from Washington, more than from what's happening in the White House. So, but I did a whole speech about Mickey and the Sorcerer's Apprentice, where when he thought it was a good idea to use his magic to get the brooms to carry the buckets of water to the well, and he started something that he couldn't stop. And then he thought it was a good idea, but then later on he got into a mess and the sorcerer had to come to the rescue. It's just an example. It's just an example that just like where Mickey took things in his hands and he started something that he couldn't stop and he created a disaster, also where it was creating a disaster and all the resentment and the grudges and unforgiveness and messing with my mind and all of that when I took it in my hands. But when I let it go, then Mom took over. Mom took care of business. So there's another milestone, landmark also that I want to get into. And I started to talk about it, but I started to get all funky and weird and to go in several different directions. There's people here, and I gotta get organized mentally. So I'll be back in a few moments.